I've seen the family photos, and the man's a mystery. Died in 1942, at the age of 43. My grandmother was his widow, and my father was his son. Oh, but I know next to nothing of the first loudon. They say he was an SOB who liked to smoke and drink. In the photos he looks handsome. Trapped is what I think, and there's one of him in uniform, and it must be World War I. They say he was an expert sailor and could handle a shotgun. In a wedding portrait posing with his young bride, his right hand hidden by her bouquet, his left hanging in his side, closed in a kind of half fist, unsure what he just done. Facing his short future, like he could hit someone. It was elbows off the table before the meal begun, but it's his hands I recognize. He gave them to his son, whose own hands held and touched me and ruffled up my head. And I recognize that half fist. I know it anywhere. Later on in the late 30s, he began to go to sea. In the photos, he looks loaded. They observe and I will heed, mugging for the camera, having a little fun. Cigarette in one hand and a drink in the other one. Yes, I know a little something about the first loudon. My grandmother was his widow, my father was his son. Tell me, what are we afraid of, and why do we resist? I spread my hands and flex my fingers, open and close my fists. I spread my hands and flex my fingers, open and close my fist. Thanks. I need a little more of my voice in the monitor, just a little bit. So, yeah, the family is a big waterfront. I work, it would seem. And in fact, the title of my new album is called Older Than My Old Man Now. And it, yeah, it's on sale here tonight.
We all got it.
Or, really? Damn, and I brought my Sharpie too. Oh well. Everybody needs a signed backup copy. And anyway, yeah. So the father thing is on it, and you know, the Loudon thing is on it. In fact, the title track refers to the two Loudons that were referred to in the last song. But another other feature of the record, and it will also be a feature in my show tonight, is my father is, in a sense, going to be a special guest. So you get two Loudons in one night. He was a journalist. He wrote for Life magazine, had a column in the magazine in the 60s and 70s and 80s called The View from Here. And a few years ago I reread all his columns and was pretty knocked out. They're good, number one, but also it's interesting, and not maybe no surprise that he and I were really hung up about a lot of the same shit, including this father question. Here's a piece of a column that he wrote in 1983. It's called Life with and Without Father. If I remain still, if I am alone and silent long enough to hear the sound of my own blood or breathing or digestion above the rustling of leaves or the whir of the refrigerator, my father is likely to turn up. He just arrives unbidden in the long-running film of my thoughts, like Hitchcock in his pictures. And he looks for all these 40-plus years of disembodiment, much like himself, big and sandy-haired with freckles on the backs of his hands. Perhaps a bit more diffident in the way he holds himself than I remember. He doesn't stay long, and as far as I can tell, his visits have no message. Yet even though years of therapy have led me to make the dark whistling claim that he's finally dead and gone, my father, who died when I was 17, continues to be my principal ghost, a lifelong eminence grise, and only my own end will finish it. Older than my old man now. He died at 63, that's way too young. Now you gotta feed me, now you gotta need me. I feel like a faithless son. 64 is awful old. You know what can happen next. Hey, I'm older than my old man ever was. I'm trying to keep it in context. Yeah, I'm older than my old man now. His father died at 42. From now on it's all gravy. I got 20 years more, maybe. I guess we'll have to wait and see. I wasn't sure the day would come. I've been living underneath this thumb. But I don't feel so free, I don't even feel like me, now that there's no race left to run. Yeah, I'm older than my old man now. Guess that means I kicked his ass. But just cause you survive, that don't mean you feel alive, and your demise will come to pass. Nobody's sure exactly why. Everybody's got to die. Still it comes as quite a blow, knowing you got to go, and the world is gonna pass you by. Older than my old man now, trying to keep it in context. Not only older than my old man ever was, but I'm guilty of outlived my lot of Death and Decay material on the new album. And, you know, hey, it's what's happening. To me, I don't know about you. But, of course, it's pretty much my favorite topic now. My favorite topic used to be shitty love songs, you know, bad love songs. But I do have a song that is a combination of those two motifs, actually. Shit love meets Death and Decay. And here it is. I went to the morgue today to see you. I knew you'd end up there right from the start. The coroner, he told me you died from natural causes, a guilty conscience and a broken heart. You should have thought about our sacred marriage, the vows we made, the promise ne'er to part. The tag they tied to your big toe, it tells the awful story. A guilty conscience and a broken heart. You sure got your comeuppance for your crime. Guilty conscience and a broken heart. That combination is a death. Now you're dead, it's too late to be sorry. You made a move that wasn't very smart. Little did you know that when you done, you get the guilty conscience and a broken. They pull back this sheet and I ID you. Seeing you so blue gave me a star. Then they slip your body back into the deep freeze. Now you got a frozen broken heart. A guilty conscience and a broken heart. You sure got your comeuppance for your crime. Guilty conscience and a frozen broken heart. That combo flat enough to never say goodbye. Can't get a drink in Harlan County. I can't get a drink and I don't know why. Why I ever came to Harlan County. Harlan County's damn near dry. Yeah, you can get a drink in Harlan County. Go to the city of Cumberland. Go to the package store on Main Street, a $20 bill in your right hand. But I can't get a drink in Harlan County. I can't get a drink and I don't know why. Why I ever came to Harlan County. Harlan County's damn near dry. Climbed to the top of Old Black Mountain. That's the highest peak in Kentucky. And if you're tired, drunk, or crazy, drive on up in an ATV. I saw a bear up on Black Mountain, carrying a six-pack in his claw. I shot that bear and it took a six-pack. Yes, I guess I broke the law. 'Cause I can't get a drink in Harlan County. I can't get a drink and I don't know why. Why I came to Harlan County. Harlan County's damn near dry. Yeah, they play a little golf in Harlan County, hunting, camping, fishing too. Still got a lot of coal mines in Harlan. I'd stay out of them if I was you. And they cook a little meth in Harlan County, chemistry in the kitchen sink. But unless you're over in Cumberland City, a thirsty man can't get a drink. No, I can't get a drink in Harlan County. I can't get a drink and I don't know why. Why I came to Harlan County. Harlan County's damn near dry.
like native.
What? What did you say?
Can't get a drink here either.
Oh, is that right? Is that right? You can't get a drink in this room? Wow, I've got some beers downstairs. We could have a raffle. They don't serve wine or anything here? Wow. Not tonight. Why is tonight? Why is tonight different than any other? It's a what? A soft, so it's not worth the trouble? You guys are all in AA, right? Okay, now I understand. What?
We're at the meeting right now.
Oh, okay. Well, here's a song about a heavy drinker. A lot of drinking going on in my family. My grandmother was like no other. Too bad you didn't meet her. Every day at 3 she'd have G&T, and at bridge you could not beat her. Christmas time she'd end up crying, listening to Chevalier. And I got $10 in a card each year in September for my birthday. My grandmother didn't much bother too much about being a granny. She didn't bake or knit, she didn't give a shit. Us kids called her nanny. In the summertime we visited, take the train up to Rhode Island. Westerly Ollie's taxi pick us up with all Island. Going up to Watch Hill, Rhode Island. Spent a couple of weeks with Nanny. Watch Hill, Rhode Island. Home of America's oldest carousel. My grandmother, my sister and brother and me all went to the ocean. In her cabana there in that big beach chair, she'd survey our commotion. At the yacht club we got our grub. We had grinders and grape soda. What a dream, popcorn, ice cream, 2 weeks, no junk food quota. My grandmother would light up another. You know that cough of hers was chronic. She didn't drink wine, she was just fine with that nice tall gin and tonic. Nanny had opinions, Nanny wasn't prissy. She said that men were queer or just drank beer, and ginger ale was for sissies. When we told Nanny we were going to call her first great-grandchild Rufus, she said, Rufus? Rufus? That's a dog's name. My grandmother provided cover for me when times got tricky. She took me in despite my sin when I was busted in the late 60s. She found me a job in a boatyard. In her kitchen I cooked my brown rice and vegetables and Natick seaweed. Wasn't too long before I wrote my first song. Pretty soon I done it twice. Yeah, my grandmother was like no other. Too bad you didn't meet her. Every day at 3 she'd have a G&T, and at bridge you could not beat her. Christmas time she'd end up crying, listening to Maurice Chevalier. And I got $10 in a card each year in September for my birthday. 1 year I got a 20, and then on my birthday. So I want to bring my father back into the picture here, back into your consciousness. He, of course, Nanny was his mom. And he wrote a lovely piece here. I'm going to do a piece of it for you. Piece of a piece, if I can find it. Gee, I hope I don't get any emails tonight. Or maybe I hope I do, because if I don't, then you'll realize how unpopular I really am. Okay, this is something he wrote in 1985. It's called Tracking the Storm. A few nights after the storm, I got a call from the nursing home about 150 miles up the coast where my mother had spent the last 4 years, alert and quick in spite of her increasing infirmity. There had been many bad spells in her long illness, but the nurse's kind, careful voice was itself a special message, and I decided to drive up the next morning. The route I traveled lay along the path of the hurricane. I could see signs of damage from the highway, many trees uprooted, others raw and broken at the tops, as if they'd been sheared off by artillery fire. As I drove, a weird cacophony of thoughts battered me. Was my mother going to die this time? Would I be at last an orphan at the age of 60? Why had I never looked into any of her funeral arrangements? Could she be buried with my father? Why had I cried when I sang to my 3-year-old daughter the night before for her eventual fatherlessness? Should I have brought along the tape of my son's new album of songs and tried to play it for his adoring grandmother? Would television, where I was going, carry the Mets card series? When I got to the town where the nursing home was, I took a little side trip, perhaps to delay seeing my mother, to the nearby village where she lived and where in 1900 my great-grandfather had built a stone house that looked out to the sea. The hurricane had hit there too, not with the impact of the terrible storm of 1938, when many were swept away, but still leaving shocking raw rips in the ground where trees had been pulled up by their roots. Leaves on the trees left standing had been burned a dull brown by the clouds of salt spray the storm had blown ashore. The sounds of power saws tore the air, and here and there monarch butterflies wafted over the roads on their scarcely interrupted migration south. Even in the semi-darkness of her little room, I could see that things were awful with my mother. Waxy pale, cheeks deeply sunken, plastic oxygen harness tugging at her nostrils. She seemed beyond frailty, lying there propped high on pillows while a nurse held her hand. She knew me when we spoke, and we talked a little before she drifted back to sleep. She loved family stories and telling and hearing them, but she was almost out of their reach that day. The next day or so passed like that, with her moving in and out of consciousness. We talked between gasps and silences in jagged pieces about her grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and pennant races. Down the hall, a senile old man howled. "Oh, shut up," she whispered fiercely. The slightest movement or sound woke her, and now and then she stopped breathing for 10, possibly 15 seconds, and her eyes were dark with fear when the big lids blew back. She asked for water often, and while she slept, I kept looking around the room. We had just celebrated her 82nd birthday, 10 days earlier. Now she'd matched her mother, who died at 82, and there were many cards mixed in with dozens of snapshots of various babies taped to the wooden doors. On one wall was a big 1985 Boston Red Sox schedule with the headline, "Catch Fenway Fever." And on another, above a dresser choked with dried flowers and a big TV set, was a small framed picture of me at the age of 7 or 8 in a white linen suit. On the wall next to her bed, in between sedate needlepoint portraits of marching horsemen, were 2 large and amazingly black and white photographs of my mother taken at least 50 years ago. In one, she is sitting on the running board of an old car. I think it was a green and black Hudson. She is wearing shorts and a halter top, as she is in the other picture, where she is clowning with my father and a good friend. And she looks glowing and simply marvelous in both. The juxtaposition of the exhausted old woman and the shadow pictures of her joyful past was suddenly too much. I wished now that she could die. I put aside the old reluctance and called the office of a local funeral director. The building itself was long and low like a bowling alley, and when I finally found the proper entrance and was led to an office, I had glimpses of empty, darkened rooms with chairs and displays of artificial flowers. The director was out for the moment, I was told. Another man, soft-voiced and slightly rumpled, interviewed me. We got off to an odd start. "Is it for yourself?" he inquired courteously. Demurring and explaining, I suddenly recalled that when I grew my beard, my mother had said it made her look old. I knew I wanted to tell her this new silly story and that somehow I wouldn't. She seemed better the following morning, her color less pale, and the nurses who watched over her so carefully were cheered up by her requests for food. "How do you feel today, Eleanor?" one asked. "I wouldn't give you 10 cents for it," she replied tartly. "Well, you look fine. Everybody tells me I look fine," she came back. The nurse grinned at me. "We can tell she's better when she gets mean." As the day wore on, she ate ice cream and put her glasses on so she could identify people as they came into the room. The electric power had failed again that morning, and we talked some about the great hurricane of '38. Her mother almost got caught in it, she told me. "How?" I asked, remembering. "Well, she'd been playing bridge at a friend's, and when she started to drive home, the wind and rain forced her off the road, and she had to take refuge at a neighbor's. Then, just as the blow was at its worst," my mother said, "some men struggled up to the house and pushed the piano against the front door to keep out the storm." Looking pleased at the story's outcome and tired by telling it, my mother closed her eyes. Deceived by the turn in her weather, I went back home then with promises to return in a few days. And that was the last story my brave, honest, funny, beautiful mother told me.